With college basketball one day away, I figured now was a good time to break down my top 30. Now, this is a mock draft, but we're still so early in the NBA that nothing is set in stone. So feel free to look at this as my personal big board as well. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break it down. UCLA guard Ilan Fiblé is one of my favorite sleepers headed into this draft. He's gonna see plenty of time on the court this season, and I love the French prospect's two-way potential. Fiblé can spot up, be active both cutting and in the passing lanes, and bring plenty of athleticism to the table. He'll only be 19 next draft day, so he's still very young, but I want to see him improve his self-creation, and Ilan has to prove that he can excel against a higher level of competition than what he's faced so far. Elliot Cadeau from Sweden is one of the best playmakers in his high school class. The UNC point guard is seemingly on a 2-year plan in college, which is partly why I have him lower than he might end up, but I truly love his passing. Cadeau is a natural-born facilitator, and his Tar Heel teammates will love playing with him. But despite his playmaking, speed, and stocky frame, Cadeau is only about 6 feet tall. There are fewer and fewer small point guards in the NBA nowadays, and he also has to keep proving himself as a three-point shooter. I recently highlighted Trey Alexander on the channel as one of the juniors to watch this season. Alexander is a shifty and long two-guard who profiles excellently in the mid-range, mostly creating for himself. And this proficiency as a shooter extends out to the three-point line. However, he really has to improve closer to the rim, and he needs to take strides creating for others instead of mostly for himself. Alexander could be a big riser for me, and he'll have the chance to do that on a good Creighton team this season. Another Swedish prospect, Bobby Klintman, made the choice to leave Wake Forest and join the Australian NBL's Next Stars program. Playing for the Cairns Taipans, Klintman is doing well in his first pro season. Most of all, he seems to be specializing as a huge wing rather than the mishmash of roles he had at Wake Forest. Klintman might end up close to or in the lottery for me come draft time, but I want to see him consistently shoot well from 3, and he's also still in search of good defense, which can let him down at times. Still, I like what I've seen from him this season. German center Ariel Hook-Porty is the oldest prospect in my top 30, but I'm truly a huge fan of his NBA fit. Hook-Porty is a legit 7-footer who moves well after recovering from a ruptured Achilles, and he's a force in the paint on both ends. The big man is a reliable finisher above the rim and out of the pick and roll, and he's making strides to fully recover his explosiveness on defense. However, he almost always needs others to create for him, and his upside on defense is somewhat limited since he can only really play in drop. Indiana freshman Mackenzie Mbako could be a lot closer to 15 than 25 next summer, so I'm really intrigued by how his college season will go. At his best, Mbako can be a walking mismatch at around 6'9", a wide frame, solid athleticism, and legit three-point shooting. Mbako is really comfortable operating on the perimeter, and he's not shy at all about letting the ball fly. But also, I think he needs to keep improving his motor on the interior and not settle so much. Mbako is still somewhat caught between being a wing and a forward, and down the line, I think his best NBA role might be similar to Naz Reid. Adem Bona was one of the best defensive bigs last season in college basketball, and I thought he should have stayed in the 2023 NBA draft. The only reason why I have him so low is because of his limited offensive potential. Bona is a great athlete and he moves really well around the floor, but he's pretty strictly a catch and finish big. I'm a huge fan of his on defense. He's excellent in the pick and roll and close to the basket. At the next level, I also think he'll be very switchable. Should Bona expand his offensive game, then he can really keep rising for me. Spanish big man Alay Mata comes in at 23 for me, which might be lower than the consensus. I've taken an in-depth preseason look at him before, and I love Mata's passing. That's by far his best attribute. He can really distribute with his back to the basket or over the top of defenses, and he makes life easy for cutters and three-point shooters. But for now, the UCLA freshman is not a versatile scorer at all, and actually he can even be pretty tentative. Then, on defense, Mata can put a lid on the rim close to the basket, but he hasn't proven to me at all yet that he can defend in space to any extent. That might be fine at the college level, but it will pose real problems in the NBA. The third straight UCLA prospect, Buon Gel, is someone whose versatility I really love. Buon Gel can shoot the three ball and then make decisions using his gravity from the outside. He can playmake for others out of the post using his great positional size and advanced understanding of the game to pick on mismatches. And he can also defend wings and forwards really well. I've been a big admirer of Buon Gel's defense so far, but it is also true that he's going to have to show that same high level against increased athleticism and more consistent size now. I also want to see Berke get more comfortable finishing at the basket where he can still have some problems, and he really has to get better at using his size near the rim since he's only an okay athlete. I've been evaluating Omaha Belo for a couple of years now, and it's hard for me not to like him. The Iowa State freshman's motor is what immediately pops out. He goes hard pretty much every single possession on both ends. Belo is a true competitor. Omaha might not excel at any one thing right now, but generally he's reliable across the board, doing what one might call the little things. He cuts hard, crashes the boards, and leverages his length and athleticism effectively. Like some other forwards his age, Belo will have to shoot from three to make the most out of his game, but I think he's improved as a jump shooter over his high school trajectory, so I'm optimistic. Melvin Aansa from France is one of the best 3-and-D wings in this year's draft. The Saint-Quentin wing has gone under the radar since he played in the French 2nd Division last season, but he was a very important part on a team that was promoted to the French 1st Division. Then this summer, he followed that up with a great Under-19 World Cup. I think Aansa is going to be a very good three-point shooter. He can already spot up, but also make triples off movement, coming out of screens, or attacking closeouts into step-backs and sidesteps. Then on defense, the French wing is multi-positional, able to guard the point of attack, wings, and big ball handlers. If Aansa shows any improvement creating his own shot, and he improves his finishing package where he can still struggle, I see no reason why he cannot be a lottery pick. Tjon Salon is one of the youngest prospects in the 2024 draft, and also one of the most intriguing. The French wing is really athletic, but still quite raw. I love Salon's size, length, and athleticism. Early on in his career, he's bound to be a threat in transition and open court situations. Then, because of his mobility and skill set, he can play the 3, the 4, and maybe even the small ball 5 in a more simplified role. Kinda similar to Bobby Clintman, but much younger and more athletic, Salon can be a huge wing that defends across positions, handles the ball a bit, and can shoot from the outside. For now though, Salon is still relatively unproven against high levels of competition. He shows flashes from 3, but shoots somewhat of a stiff shot, and he can have some problems handling the ball and creating for himself and others. Australian point guard Tyrese Proctor is one of the better pick-and-roll players in the 2024 draft. We've looked at the Duke prospect before, but I love Proctor's craftiness out of screens. He's a very good and willing passer who can manipulate defenses and then find the open man. As a scorer, he's at his best operating from the mid-range, but he's also a pretty good three-point shooter as he showed last season. Still though, I truly worry about Proctor's lack of burst and athleticism. He's a below-the-rim athlete who struggles to create consistent separation even at the college level. If Proctor can offset those concerns this season, and he proves that he can maintain his efficiency as a playmaker while also handling the ball more and being a good three-point shooter, Proctor could end up as a top 10 pick. Kentucky's Aaron Bradshaw is currently out with a foot injury, but he's another guy who I've watched for a while, evaluated in person, and I'm very high on. Bradshaw can be one of those bigs who is impactful above the rim on both ends, catching lobs and blocking shots, but then he can also step out to the perimeter to shoot and make threes. At a time in the NBA where prospects with the dimensions of a Chet Holmgren or Victor Wembanyama are increasingly popping up, I think it would make a lot of sense for teams to have someone like Bradshaw on their rosters. He's not the same at all, but he can move and act similarly and also bring shades of similar skills. Going forward, I want to see Bradshaw locked in consistently. He can still drift in and out of games too easily, and I'm unsure about his switchability on defense. For now, he tends to play with a fairly high center of gravity. Nikola Topic is an early draft cycle sensation for good reason. The Serbian point guard is a top 2 passer in this draft class, and he could be the youngest prospect drafted come next summer. Topic is already close to being a pick-and-roll maestro at 18 years old who facilitates with awesome patience, incredible accuracy, and dazzling creativity. With the NBA being so pick-and-roll heavy, it makes sense why Topic has so many fans already. I'm a fan as well, but he still needs to soothe some of my worries about his game. Topic is a little predictable going left, he doesn't create for himself in the mid-range, and he's not a good three-point shooter. This season so far, he's only made 5 of his 23 triples. On defense, I'm also not entirely sure yet what his outlook is at the NBA level. Topic has nice size, but he barely ever gets any stops, and he does not look switchy. Stefon Castle could end up much higher than 15, but I'm still wondering about what his role at UConn will be exactly with Tristan Newton and plenty of other guards on the roster. Castle profiles as a big guard who's shown flashes from all 3 levels. Right now, he is at his best from the mid-range though, and taking advantage of smaller mismatches close to the basket. As a facilitator, he's a good decision maker and a solid passer, but not a great one yet. If Castle proves to me that he can really shoot from 3 this season, and also that he can really play as a point guard rather than a guard who runs the point sometimes, that will go a long way. But make no mistake, for me Castle is a potential top 10 pick. Providence's Garway Dwall will be well known for people very tapped into all things draft, but in the big picture, he's still a sleeper. Dwall is a really long, lanky point guard who last played for Southern California Academy. He's a smooth operator with a creative handle for his nice positional size and length, and strides that cover a ton of ground. As a scorer, I like what we've seen from Dwall so far. His athleticism seems to improve every time I see him, he can pull up from in between and shoot over the top, and he looks comfortable as a three-point shooter. Sometimes though, progress is not linear, so I'm curious to see how Dwall fares at the college level in Providence, and I'll be tracking to see how his narrow frame holds up, how real his shooting is, and whether he can keep growing as a facilitator. For now, Garway can still have a tough time making decisions when the second level of defense arrives. Tyrese Proctor from the G League Ignite is a great athlete, a creative scorer off the bounce, and he's a point guard who might blaze a trail for the next NBA Academy Africa prospects. We've profiled Daron before, who has not debuted yet this season since he's still recovering from an ankle injury, but I love all the flashes that he showed up to now. The Central African Republic prospect is super bouncy, and he's a really willing shooter, able to chain moves together into his pull-up with real range. I also believe that Daron thinks about the game the right way in terms of the reads he makes and the passes he tries. But it remains to be seen just how green he is and how he'll handle being a point guard against G League competition. If Kyle Filipowski had gone in the lottery in the 2023 draft, I would have had no problems with that. Instead, he returned for his sophomore season at Duke, and I think he might go even higher this year. At close to 7 feet, Filipowski is as big as many centers, but he has real finesse with his handle and his ability to put the ball on the floor. As a freshman, Flip was solid at the rim, even if there is room for improvements on really high usage last season. The Duke prospect can play out of the high post or the wing as a facilitator, but he can also get his own bucket while being effective rolling or diving to the basket. It's true that Filipowski is a limited athlete with an even wingspan. This can certainly be a concern, but Flip moves really fluidly, he's huge, and he understands how and when to be in the right place. This season, I'm hoping for his three-point shooting to become more of a reality rather than just a theory. He has touch, but the conversion was not there as a freshman. Zakari Rash is a high-ceiling bet, but I also think he has a safer floor than what he's given credit for. In the best-case scenario, the Frenchman looked like a big wing at around 6'8", who could handle the ball, create his own shot, and convert at all 3 levels. That hype has tapered off a bit, which I think is reasonable after some struggles last season and at the Under-19 World Cup, but I also think Rash got too much flack. He remains a very good prospect with okay athleticism, nice length and height, and legitimate scoring instincts. So far this year, Rash has gradually gotten more and more comfortable. He's been useful spotting up, cutting, and playing in transition, but now we're also seeing his ball handling and self-creation pop up more. Then, I also think Rash is a decent passer, even if he can struggle against physicality. And when he's locked in, he can be a tenacious defender, helping at the rim with his length and smothering ball handlers on the perimeter with his size. Rash's recent improvement has to continue, but he has the tools to build on what's been an excellent start to the season. Ethan Almanza is a big-time winner who's shown as much with Spain at pretty much every youth level so far. Right now, the Spanish big is mostly a play finisher. He's great out of the pick and roll with excellent touch at the basket, and he keeps improving as an athlete every few months it seems. This summer, Almanza showed that he could be the #1 option on a championship team. That's not going to be his NBA future most likely, but it shows to me that he's very good and mature as a decision maker. This is usually as a scorer, but sometimes also as a passer. Almanza's challenge is that he might be a little undersized to be a full-time center. And now he's a good athlete, but still not a great one above the rim. Proving that he can protect the basket effectively while also defending in space is going to be very important for his draft stock. And then, if Ethan can shoot threes, right now he cannot, and also diversify his offense some, that would go a very long way in my eyes. I'm incredibly high on Bronny James, maybe higher than most, but that comes from a comfort level of having evaluated Bronny live in a variety of settings over the last 3 years. Just about every single time I've watched him, Bronny has been the best player on the floor. The USC guard is maybe not a flashy facilitator, but he's cerebral. You can count on him to make the right reads nearly every single time. Bronny's playmaking will lend itself to the NBA since he's very useful in transition, against scrambling defenses, and connecting broken plays. James might not have gotten that many pick and roll reps at Sierra Canyon, but I also think he proved himself in EYBL action when it comes to creating for others out of ball screens. Down the other end on defense, the 19-year-old is a threat at the point of attack and in the passing lanes. Down the line, I have confidence that his NBA role can be similar to that of Lonzo Ball on the Pelicans or the Bulls. In terms of improvement points, Bronny has to become a more versatile finisher at the basket. He doesn't always get the most of his athleticism there, and he also has to show that he can create his own jump shot, particularly from the mid-range, on a consistent basis. DJ Wagner has long been considered one of the best high school prospects in his class, and the same goes for the 2024 NBA draft. First and foremost, I love the Kentucky guard's speed. He's genuinely rapid getting downhill, and Wagner uses that to rack up paint touches, score, and distribute. The Camden, New Jersey native is a bucket, and right now he's probably better at driving and finishing, but he's also shown real flashes creating his own jumper off the bounce. As his freshman season is about to start, I'm looking to see how consistent Wagner's three-pointer will be. He's still streaky from the outside despite his on and off ball uses. And then, when it comes to his playmaking, Wagner is definitely more of a scorer than a facilitator right now. But if he's to be more of a point guard than a small two guard, he has to make leaps in that area. My sell on Jacobe Walter is that he can be a lethal 3-level scorer who keeps it simple, has good size and athleticism on the wing, and who can play on and off the ball. Walter was at Link Academy in high school, and he was the best player on one of the best teams in the country. I've also evaluated Jacobe in person, and it's impressive how easy he makes scoring look. The Baylor freshman can certainly make tough shots one-on-one, but he can also put the ball in the hoop without breaking a sweat. My questions with Walter mostly surround his defensive role right now. His motor can be lacking on that end, but he has the tools to be a solid positional defender, even if he might only be a good, not great athlete. Finally, the ball can also stick to Walter's hands sometimes more than it should. I don't think he's a ball stopper, but he can slow things down sometimes instead of making quick decisions. There's a good chance Maas Buellis ends up in the top 5 or even higher, but I need to see more from the G League Ignite playmaker. At first glance, I love Buellis' three-point shooting. He made big improvements there during his senior year of high school, and it seems like that has carried over into the Ignite. Then, at around 6'10", Buellis has shown glimpses of ball handling and passing, and that's very intriguing for his size. There's a chance he could become a dribble-pass-shoot player in the future. However, he can fade in and out of games too easily for his skill level, and I think he needs to keep fleshing out his playmaking. In other words, can he actually run an offense, or is he just going to attack closeouts and make secondary reads here and there? Buellis really piques my interest, but there is a chance that he's going to have to specialize in his role a bit more. I'm high on Donovan Clingan, and I think the UConn center can be a top 5 pick next summer. Even if you only watch him play a couple of times, Clingan's strengths are evident. He can finish everything around the rim, and then, down the other end, bring plenty of rim protection and paint patrolling to the table. In recent times, we've seen the likes of Jalen Duren or Mark Williams excel as what one might consider traditional centers in the NBA. And I think Clingan can do the same. If anything, I think this player type has gone underrated recently, and longtime viewers will know how much I loved Jalen Duren. But as a freshman, Clingan played a relatively low number of minutes, so I'm waiting to see how he adapts to a bigger role. Kentucky wing Justin Edwards has a lot of tools that NBA teams love in his position nowadays. Immediately, Edwards will be a transition threat with his athleticism, length, and ability to put pressure on the rim. But more than that, the Wildcats prospect is also a potential 3-level scorer. He can attack closeouts in a straight line, pull up from the mid-range with his lefty jumper, and he's shown flashes out to 3, even if right now, in my opinion, he's more functional as a spot-up shooter. At this stage, I consider Edwards' 3 to be his swing skill. He's a very good athlete, but he needs those lanes to the rim to stay open. After that, I want to keep seeing growth in his handle. It can be loose and he's too left-handed right now, but I am pretty in on Edwards as a two-way talent. Alexandre Sar was a massive riser in preseason, and although his two-way dominance has not always carried over to his NBL start, the French big is still really interesting. On both ends, it's the amount of ground that Sar covers that stands out. Defensively, he protects the rim, but also looks very fluid stepping outside the paint. And on offense, he can catch lobs, finish around the basket, shoot threes, and maybe even handle the ball a little bit. With Sar, I want to see his motor continue to rev up. He ebbs and flows more than recent big prospects have, in my opinion. I'm also hoping that he can become a more imposing rebounder, and although his ball handling flashes are appealing, I wonder how legit those are and if NBA teams will ever actually tap into them. I love watching Ron Holland. The G League Ignite wing is the best competitor and hustle player in this year's draft. His motor has always been amazing, but Holland is much more than just heart. He has genuine skill as well, and he shows very real year-on-year improvement. Holland can rack up points in transition, off rebounds and cuts, but he's gradually becoming more dangerous creating his own offense. So far this season against the Perth Wildcats and at the FIBA Intercontinental Cup, Holland has created his own drives and jumpers off the bounce to good effect. This budding self-creation is encouraging, but I want to see how efficient it can be over the entire season. Holland is historically an inconsistent jump shooter, and he's also prone to playing out of control sometimes. But with his rapidly improving offense and his multi-positional defense, it's hard for me to not see Holland as a potential #1 pick. My top pick headed into the college season, though, is USC point guard Isaiah Collier. Simply put, I think Collier has almost everything that NBA teams need from a lead guard. He's a great athlete with a super quick first step who gets into the paint at will and finishes through defenders with his league-ready frame. At worst, he's a top 2 passer in the draft, if not the best, with his plethora of pick-and-roll reads and transition playmaking. And when it comes to his shooting, I'm not that worried. Sure, Collier's jump shot has long been his perceived Achilles heel, but after watching him multiple times in person over the course of his senior year, I was blown away by the improvement that he quickly piled up. Collier is a willing self-creator from distance, and he can be streaky, but he can also make huge, tough shots. I want to see him lock in on defense more, and of course, his jumper remains an unanswered question to some extent, but I feel really good about having Isaiah Collier as my #1 pick headed into the bulk of this year's draft cycle.